Chapter 9 continued. Breaking through the tree line, I found the two stallions parked on a sloping rock-strewn field. The area was filled with trees and brush stumps, hardly the perfect landing zone. The two cobras floated above us, guns at the ready for any hostile encounter, and above the cobras were a pair of Harrier jump jets. I didn't see any Bosnian Serbs, but if they showed up, I felt I was on the side of superior firepower. U.S. Marines had jumped out of one of the stallions and fanned out across the hilltop to form defense perimeter. Either standing or kneeling, they had their M16s pointed in all directions. I knew they were waiting on me, but for a few moments I just stood there. I didn't know which helicopter I was supposed to board. It was a strange feeling as I looked around and waited for someone to give me permission to move forward. After 6 long days of waiting, these last few moments were the longest yet. Finally, a burly young sergeant standing outside the gunner's hatch of the closest chopper began waving me in. I ducked my head, fearful of the stallion's rotor blades, and made a beeline for the open door. I had my Beretta waving in my hand, thinking I might still have to use it if the Serbs surprised me. To make sure the Beretta didn't accidentally go off, the sergeant kindly hit my wrist before I entered the chopper. The gun dropped to the ground, and the sergeant picked it up for me. My floppy orange hat flew off my head, a souvenir I'd gladly leave for the Serbs. I no longer needed it. We waited another minute for everybody to reboard the helicopters. I was shivering badly. Colonel Burnt slipped his jacket over me, and I was asked if I wanted to see a medic. I shook my head, but I took someone's canteen and polished off a quart of water in record time. Someone else served me a pre-packaged meal of cold chicken stew. I couldn't believe all the attention I was getting. The number of men, the aircraft that had been sent to rescue me. When I looked into the faces of the 30 U.S. Marines surrounding me, I was struck by how young they were. Their average age, I would learn later, was 19. They had done their job with precision and perfection. I felt incredibly proud of them. More than that, I owed them my life. At 6:48 a.m., 6 minutes after the two super stallions had landed, they lifted off the rock-strewn field and soared over the ridgeline, heading west to the Adriatic. I knew we were still not out of danger. A sergeant next to me said something about taking fire, and I said yes, I'd taken fire in the last 6 days. It was so loud in the chopper that I hadn't heard him clearly. What the sergeant was really saying was that the helicopter was taking fire now. As the ground fog burned off and the super stallion glided over the Croatian landscape, Krajanian Serbs' anti-aircraft artillery had opened up like the 4th of July. Maybe their radar had picked up on the stallion coming over, and now that I was on board and there was no fog to hide us, they wanted badly to shoot us down. At 70 feet in length and able to travel at only 200 miles per hour, the stallion was a fat and juicy target. One round tore through our main rotor, while a second damaged the trail blade. A third punctured the cabin on rebound, ended up meshed in a sergeant's canteen. Then, as if from out of nowhere, came the corkscrew white plumes of shoulder-launched SAMs. At least 2 or 3 were fired, and one passed just below us. Please, God, I prayed, let none of these good men get hurt. Let us all make it home again. Our door gunner returned Serbian fire. Others sat silently and grimly, trying to evade the enemy. The pilot took the stallion low to the ground, once more skimming over barn and house roofs. After 5 minutes, the anti-aircraft fire came to an abrupt halt. At 7:15 a.m., we were clear of Bosnian airspace. Relief smiles and sighs broke out of the cabin. No one had been hurt. The stallion, despite damage from the anti-artillery guns, was on course for the USS Kearsarge. While the calm blue waters of the Adriatic sparkled below, that was one of the most beautiful sights in the world. Chapter 10. By the time Basher 1-1 had made contact with me in the wee hours of Thursday morning, it was still Wednesday evening in the States. Everyone in the O'Grady household in Alexandria, Virginia, and my mom and her husband, Joe, in Seattle, Washington, were dazed and tired. My dad had shed 18 pounds in the last 5 days, and Stacy and Paul didn't know what to say to him or to each other anymore. Hopes had been raised and then dashed too many times. When talking, they stubbornly refused to refer to me in the past tense, but secretly each was trying to adjust to the fact that I might be dead. This waiting couldn't go on forever. They had to continue with their everyday lives. Dad had his medical practice. Paul was due to start a job in North Carolina. Stacy was through with teaching for the summer, but she wanted to be with our mom in Seattle. That evening, the three played a game of parcheesi and had dinner, and Paul and Stacy turned in for the night. My dad, who was getting used to the sleepless routine, drifted up to bed and stared at the walls. In Seattle, my mother spent Wednesday evening much the way she had the previous 4 nights, waiting for news of her son and trying to hold on to whatever hope she could. She had gotten into the habit of opening a world atlas to the page of the former Yugoslavia, now Bosnia and Croatia and Serbia, and running her finger over the page, over the roads and rivers and tiny towns. She thought of all the people who lived there. Maybe someone would be there to help her son. My mom basically believed in the goodness of people. Not everybody in Bosnia was the enemy. She would imagine I was somewhere on that page among decent people, and the thought comforted her. But nights were hard. She didn't like to go to sleep. She felt was somehow abandoning me if she took a break and went to bed, as if I were a sick kid who might need her for something. At 12:48 a.m. Thursday morning Eastern Time, the phone rang on my father's bedside table. He suspected it was my brother with another rumor about my whereabouts in Bosnia. The caller identified himself as Colonel Wald, my wing commander at the 31st Fighter Wing, who had been in touch with my family since the shootdown. Tonight, Colonel Wald said he had a different kind of news. Good news. Unbelievable news. He told my dad that I had been found, apparently safe and sound, and that at this very moment I was being picked up by a rescue team. Screaming that I was alive, Dad ran into Stacy's room and woke her up with the joyous news, and then they both barged into Paul's room and began jumping up and down on the bed like a couple of kids. It was like Christmas and BJ Day rolled into one. My mother and Joe got their phone calls around 10 p.m. Wednesday night Pacific time with the same news from Colonel Wald. My mom collapsed on the floor and sobbed wildly. It was as if she said later she had been holding everything in for so long and now she just fell apart. Like me, she would need a little time to readjust to a normal routine.